Martijn Aslander is a thought leader, a genuine disruptor who, when asked to describe himself, told me that he's a reader, a writer, a speaker, and a thinker. I don't think it does the man justice. I've seen him in action. I've heard his ideas. I've been afraid of the future and excited about the possibility. I hope that he'll bring you something genuinely thought-provoking. So without any further ado, please give a warm welcome to Martijn Aslander.
Thank you. So let me see. Oh, I'm switched on. So, great. Let me start. Is there anyone here in the room who ever attended a lecture of me before? One, Frank, obviously. Okay, great. So most of you have no idea who I am, how to benefit from that. Who of you are students? No. Oh, just a few. Who is running a startup? Great. Who is working for a bank? Any government people here? Thank you, welcome. Anyone here working for a pension fund? No? Just one. Okay, welcome. Great. I'm going to talk to you about, of course, disruption in the network and information age. And, well, I don't know if everyone here in the room is familiar with this quote of Mr. Gates. I'm not per se a huge fan of him, but I think he's right here. The world doesn't need banks. The world needs banking, of course. And I think that will be true for the upcoming 10 years, maybe. But I think the entire finance system will be obsolete within 10 years. So I'm going to try to clarify that. So at least you're in business until the upcoming 10 years. And well, there's still a piece of the pie that you can grab, so give it a shot. And I would like to give you some insights on what's happening. There's this very famous Harvard Business Review article from the 60s. It's called Marketing Myopia. Is there anyone here who ever read it? No? They should teach it here at this university, I guess. And one of the main aspects of that paper was that long ago the railroad guys were suddenly in trouble because they were thinking they were in the railroad business. But they weren't. They were actually in the transport business. But they failed to recognize that they were actually in a different business than they thought they would be. And I think a lot of people in the banking industry, in the finance industry, think they're in finance. But I think you're in the business of trust. And I don't know who of you is familiar with the trust equation, but trust is something that you should dive more into, because you can build a lot of services, but in the end, your real product, I think, is trust. And trust contains, according to this theory, about a few aspects. It's about credibility, and of course reliability, but also about intimacy. But the way you connect with other people, the way you interact, is very important. It's about self-orientation. Are you really in the business of creating value for another, really helping someone out, of trying to grab his money? A lot of people are shareholder-based companies, but I think you really have to focus on the human aspects. So I think you're in the trust business. Just remember that. Who of you is owns already Bitcoins? Okay, who of you is working with the blockchain already, or is even studied the blockchain? Okay, you would expect that here. Okay, well, the blockchain is the beginning of the end of the financial world as we know it, so please dive into that. I think the Bitcoin is not so very important. I think what's underneath it, so the fundamentals behind Bitcoin is called the blockchain. The blockchain will not only totally transform the world of finance, but also the way democracies and the government works, because it functions as a trusted third party, and I think it will be the end of a lot of organizations. Let me talk to you about the network and information age. A lot of people that I meet here are very into networking. I assume everybody here is on LinkedIn or at Facebook. But most of the people that I meet never studied network effects and network theory. And network effects are, I think, one of the main drivers behind a lot of stuff that's happening around us right now. Well, the first guy that ever bought a fax machine couldn't do anything with it. So he had to wait until someone else also bought a fax machine. And that's funny. You purchase something, but because someone else also buys something, the first one benefits from that. And the millionth guy who ever bought a fax machine, or a lady, added value to all the existing fax machines before. And this is also true for mobile phones, of course. And Mr. Metcalfe says that every node that you add to a network creates a quadratic effect on the power of the network because of the extra interconnectivity possibilities. Well, of course, we now have 4G networks, but within a few years we will have 5G networks. And network effects, that will mean we don't only have the Internet of Things. Forget about the Internet of Things. If you heard about it, it will be the Internet of everything. And network effects, I think, are one of the most important drivers behind everything that's happening around us. And I will clarify that in half an hour. But we not only live in a network age, we also live in an information age. And a lot of people think that you can save information, can preserve information, that you can secure information, but a good hacker walks into the Pentagon and hacks the Pentagon. So if even the Pentagon is not safe, don't worry about security or privacy. Who of you senses every now and then this feeling of information overload? Yeah, it's common behind with knowledge workers, and I guess most of you are knowledge workers, but information overload is not the real problem. Of course, last 10, 15 years we had more notifications than ever before, more information around us, and it will be more impactful in the upcoming 10 years. But information overload is not the real problem of the information age. Something underneath is the real problem, and it's called filter failure. We never learned how to filter information and how to leverage filters to just get exactly information so we can get meaning out of all the noise that there is. And being able to filter information is something I think should be on the strategy with boards and management and HR. And somehow digital skills are not on the agenda of people who try to train other people. So you learn a lot of stuff here at the university, but digital skills is not on board. And even in the HR world, which is based about leadership and talent and blah, 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 digital skills are not on their strategic agenda, which is weird because we spend a lot of time every day dealing with information. I monitor about 900 websites and weblogs per day, and I only use my computer for only 1 hour because most of the time I interact with individuals, not with computers. Who of you uses RSS on a daily basis? Oh, that's more than ever. On average, I do this very often. Who of you have no idea what RSS is? Don't worry, I'm here to tell new things. Okay, please write it down. RSS, and then for beginners, and then you go to YouTube and don't spend the night watching television, but try to figure out what I'm talking about, because your ability to filter information and to get all the information that you need on any topic that you need tomorrow, well, you need RSS for that. One of the great stuff that I encountered in my search on what's happening in the information age is this story. I really think it's incredible. The best solution from nature to copy information and to preserve it is DNA, of course. And scientists already are able to store information in DNA. But the amount of information you can store in 1 gram of DNA is the same as 500,000 DVDs chunk full of data, 7.9 gigabytes per DVD. Can you imagine how much that is? I mean, 500,000 DVDs, you can store it in 1 gram of DNA within 10 or 15 years. You can make millions of copies of it via a biological process in only 1 hour, and you can preserve it for a few hundred years. So that means within our body cells, within 10 or 15 years, we can take all the movies ever, all the photos ever, all the comic books, all the books ever, and we can take it in our body. So you can easily copy that. So this is stuff that's happening right under our nose. So if you combine the network age and the information age all together, you get something like what I call the new renaissance. And I think this book is about it. Who of you have read the book Abundance of Peter Diamandis? Is it well known here or not yet? Oh, you must know the famous quote. The difference between where you are now and in 5 years depends on the quality of books you've read. And as far as I'm concerned, this is the only book you really have to read right now. It's written by Peter Diamandis. And Peter is one of the founders of the Singularity University. It's the university that was founded by Google, Tesla, and NASA because they thought that the traditional universities did science, of course, but they studied things that already happened. But we should also study things that are happening right now and tomorrow. So they created a different curriculum. And abundance is about what will happen when there's a convergence of exponential technologies. So what's happening right now is that biotechnology and neurotechnology, nanotechnology, sensor technology, deep learning, predictive intelligence, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, 4D printing, DNA sequencing, open source, open data, big data, open hardware, the maker movement, the do-it-yourself movement, and social forums like Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn are intertwining, are conjugating all together. That's happening in a real fast pace. And this book studies the societal, economical effects of that. And what Peter predicts here in this book that in 2020, 2035 actually, solar power, because of the convergence of all those technologies, will be free. Solar power will be free because the decrease in the price, more powerful technology will be there. So effectively, solar power will be free in 20 years. It will be the end of the dominance of the gas and oil businesses. And I follow him in that. And I think if energy is free, then creating fresh water will be free as well. So we actually already solved the water problem. We can now turn salt water into fresh water, but we need power to do that, and power costs money. But when power becomes free, we also have free water. So you can get rid of the desert, can grow vegetables, plants, stuff like that. So I think because of stuff like this, within 30 years, Africa will be a better continent to live in, maybe already, of course, than Europe. This is heavy for what's happening because this is a change in all the paradigms that we've ever seen when we're going to live in a world of abundance. After that book was published, this book was published, written by a friend of mine, Yuri van Geest, a Dutch guy, and Salim Ismail. Those are guys who are working at Singularity University as well. And this book is one of the highest recommended books ever on Amazon, which is weird because it only was published last October. So being that high on the bestseller list on Amazon when it comes to management books is really huge. And the book is about exponential organizations. Why we see now around us new type of organizations that are 10 times faster than yours, 10 times better, and also 10 times cheaper. And what are you going to do about it? And it's a total new paradigm when we look at organizational principles. Let me jump to linearity versus exponentiality. Well, who of you is very insecure? Who is so insecure that you prefer not to share it with others? Yeah, don't worry. We as human beings tend to be very insecure, and that's okay. We deal with it in our own ways and we're fine. But because we're insecure, we love predictability, especially in the banking industry. They really love predictability. But so we are used to linear concepts. We love linearity because you can predict it, like this graph here. You can easily predict what will happen when it comes to linearity. Exponentiality is multiplication times the multiplication times the multiplication and so forth. And our brain is not very good at dealing with stuff like that. So 2 times 2 is 4. Times 4 is 16, of course. Times 16 is 256. Times 256 is 65,526. And the next number will be in the billions. So this is something that our mind cannot really deal with this. We see this graph, this exponential graph, in the world of computers. Maybe you heard of the law of Mr. Moore. He says every 18 months, the amount of transistors on a single chipset doubles while the price remains the same. So this tiny computer here is only 20 euros. It's an open source hardware computer called an Arduino. And this thing is more powerful for 20 euros than the big machines that we had in the 60s that costed millions and didn't even fit in this room. So we saw that computer chips, computer technology is following this curve. Well, in normal language. In the Netherlands, we have where I come from, we had a record shop. It was called the Free Record Shop. And there was a guy, the owner of the shop, and he discovered in the 70s that if you went to London, and because of currency differences, when the British pound was different than the Dutch guilder at that time. You could buy very cheap LPs in London, and then you take them to the Netherlands, you sell them, and then you make money. And he was very good at that. He created a shop, it was called the Free Record Shop, and that was fine. But in the 70s, we already had the internet. It was called ARPANET and DARPANET and whatever. So this was already happening, the internet, somewhere here. And in the 80s, this guy discovered something interesting. People were prepaid to buy all the music they already had, again, on a different medium called a CD. And people really started to buy a lot of music, and then this guy became very rich. Here the internet was growing and growing and growing, and suddenly here this guy went IPO, and somebody said, hey Hans, great that you go to the stock market and that you can make a lot of money, but did you hear about the internet? And he felt, oh my God, yeah, internet, what to do about it? But then suddenly we had World Online, AOL, we had the first internet bubble, and then he thought, wow, gee, I'm safe, no problem at all. And suddenly here we saw the rise of mobile, 3G, 4G, Spotify, boom. And suddenly this guy was out of business. What's interesting is that he saw what was coming. He didn't really understand it. He saw it, but it was deceptive. And when he recognized it, it suddenly was disruptive, and he couldn't do anything about it. So this guy is broke right now. So that's not very a real problem, because we don't really need record shops. But I think that this graph also counts for big electricity firms, pharmaceuticals, banks, pension funds, insurance companies, and so forth. So this is happening right now. Uber, I don't know if who's an Uber user? Yeah, Uber is not a taxi company. Uber has nothing to do with taxis. Uber is a data-driven deep learning algorithm company that is playing with supply-demand friction in the transport business. And they're not aiming at just moving people, they're aiming at how to move stuff and people at the cheapest, fastest way. And as soon as we have self-driving cars, they will kick out the drivers, and they already have the market. Uber is typically a company that behaves this way. They don't really have assets, like Airbnb doesn't have assets as well. They're upscalable, downscalable, they use all kind of algorithms. So the architecture of this kind of companies is totally different than the architecture of companies that we know of. So where does this lead us? I'm just going to give you a few examples. Who of you have heard of graphene already? Okay. Graphite, most of you know, it's in your pencil. It's the black stuff. That makes it work, actually. And if you take a piece of tape, and you draw a line with your pencil on this piece of tape, and you put another piece of tape on it, and you detach it very slowly and carefully, you get a very thin layer of graphite. It's called graphene. And it's a super material. It's a small, almost as strong as diamond. It's bendable, which is very practical for a lot of reasons, and it's a supercapacitor. So this is a shift, a paradigm shift in the way we design batteries. And batteries are really one of the biggest problems of mankind, because we have a lot of power all over the world, solar power, wind power, but how to store it and how to transport it. Who of you have had problems with charging their with an empty cell phone, with an empty battery? I mean, we all encountered that, I guess. With this technology, within a few years, they expect that we can charge our cell phones in only 2 seconds. Boom, ready. And when you apply this technology in an electrical car, it will charge in only 4 minutes. When we can charge an electrical car in 4 minutes, or under 4 minutes, it will be a dramatic change in the automotive industry, distribution, logistics, drones, pacemakers, whatever. So this is one of the thousands and millions of inventions that's happening right now. A lot of people that I encounter think, well, this age is like, wow, new revolution, great age. It's like the same as when we had the steam machines and stuff like that. But the steam machines were only in the hands of a few percent or 1% of all the people. The stuff that I'm talking about right now is potentially in the hands of 2 billion people, and within a few years in the hands of 4 billion people. And they're all innovating. The best solution in any field always comes from another field. So we're learning faster than ever as mankind. And with stuff like this, it will happen faster than everybody can understand. I'm going to talk a bit about disruption in the health industry, because I think you can see it as a metaphor for what will happen in the finance industry. This thing is already on the market. It's a Skio. It has a lot of algorithms behind it, deep learning, sensor technology, beautiful design. It's $120. And you could use it if you're allergic for certain types of food. Is there anyone here in the room allergic for nuts, for instance? Okay, well, if you're allergic for certain types of nuts or peanuts, and you get it, you eat it by accident, you have to go to hospital. Some people even die. That's a pity for them, but huge cost for society as well. If you have something like this and you aim it at your food, it will warn you if it will contain peanuts or nuts, because it has a molecular sensor that senses the radiation that's coming out of peanuts or nuts or any kind of matter. So this is a big game changer. The next version of this, and they're already building it, will be better, cheaper, more beautiful, more accurate. And if you aim it at your apple or your steak, it will tell you how many calories it contains. And the fifth version of this will be invisible. Not like, woohoo, invisible, but all this technology can then be so small that it will be integrated in Apple Watch or the next version that will come up. So this is dramatic changing stuff in a lot of industries at the same time. Is there any Star Trek fan in this room? No Trekkies? Yeah, okay. Then you must have heard of the tricorder. Well, actually, this is the world's first tricorder that won a prize for creating the first tricorder. It's a great sensor. I have it here. It's 140 euros. And the main reason why a lot of people go to a doctor, if you have the luxury of having access to a doctor, if you use this device and you point it at your head, it will measure all your vital functions, body functions, in 2 minutes. You can store the data, throw it away. If you store it, you can share it or not share it. And if you share it, you can share it anonymously or with people with the same disease as you have, or not, or openly. So the data set that we will have in the upcoming few years, because of stuff like this, will be 10,000 times more than all the pharmaceuticals have altogether. But they're normally not so happy to share this kind of information. So this is happening right now, because of the confluence of all those technologies. Let me see, here it is. Is there anyone here in the room who ever went to a hospital for making a heart film? No? Healthy people here, I guess. Well, this thing here, normally in the Netherlands you need 10 or 15 people before you actually get your heart film, because you have to make an appointment with the assistance of the doctor, people like that. This little thing here is only $75. And you hold it in your hand, and within 2 minutes, you have an FDA-approved heart film. The problem is it will send it via ultrasound to your smartphone, but you cannot interpret it because you need a year of practice and study to understand what's in the movie. But that's not a real problem, because there's a button and you push it, and you send it over to 20,000 doctors that are in training. And they use this data set to figure out how does a heart film works. And if 200 people have the same conclusion, well, let's go for that. But the fifth version of this will be almost free and will have the data sets in it of a few million people at that time. So you don't even need doctors again. So this is all what's happening in the upcoming 5 or 10 years, and this is already here right now. I don't know, are there people already here in the room working with IBM Watson? Is there anyone who never heard of IBM Watson? Is it, I don't know if this is news or old news or... Hard to read this audience. Okay, explain it, okay. You must have heard of Deep Blue. There was once a computer that has won from Kasparov, the chess champion in the world. And this is his nephew. It's faster. IBM Watson has won this famous game on American television called Jeopardy. And the only thing that the IBM Watson computer did was memorize the entire Wikipedia and computize and calculate all the links on Wikipedia. And he won from the 2 best experts in the world. This is really great news for humanity and for computer science. But within 10 years, computer technology will not be 100 times faster or 1,000 times faster, but 1,000,000 times faster than it's right now. We have no idea what 1,000,000 times faster and almost free, accessible for 4 billion people at that time, will actually mean on a mankind level. We cannot even imagine what 1,000 times faster than now will actually mean. So within 10 years, this will be here. And we have a Dutch minister who says, okay, computers, automation and robots will threaten the employment. And I think he's right, but he has no idea how right he actually is. I was giving a lecture to big law firms in Amsterdam. And I had an audience of about 300 people. I said, because of this, you soon will be out of business. Your entire business case will be gone because of this. Because within 10 years' time, if this computer is 1,000,000 times faster, it can not only memorize and computize the entire Wikipedia. That's easy. He already did that. You could memorize and computize all the laws ever written, all the verdicts, all the reactions in the media, all the experts, in 2 seconds for free. The big money at most of the big law firms is not made by the guys with a big tariff and the top of the top dogs of the organization, but all the guys and girls who are trying to figure out all this information and data, because this is where you make the bulk of the hours that you can invoice to your customers. So within 10 years, this business won't exist anymore. I'm positive. Who of you makes money on doing auditing? Anyone? Yeah. Well, I think an audit, most of the times, I'm not a financial expert, but an audit is nothing like a very strict set of rules that you have to use to figure out if the books are compliant with this algorithm. You can program this set of rules as an algorithm. And it's now expensive and difficult, but within 10 years' time, you can use this little algorithm to figure out in a few seconds if there's anything not compliant. So then you have everything that's unnormal, and then you can figure that out. So I think most of the people that are accountants, we really don't need them anymore. And that was also the promise. We don't need a lot of work anymore, because they promised that this type of stuff would make us, our life better and easier. So I think it's good news. And you could also be an accountant as a hobby, but don't think that's your work anymore. Do real work that really changes something on a humankind level. So this is happening right now. And what is very nice, by the way, of IBM, they understand the principles and the concepts of ecosystems. So they have an API. So every individual can already play with IBM Watson computing power already. So you can, it's just a matter of time when a few kids or students figure out how to deal with this and have more computing power in their hands than most of the big companies who still use Siebel or Oracle of SAP. That's old news. I don't know, who of you is following the news around Apple Pay? Okay. Who of you is using an Apple device? Okay, who's on Android? That's fine as well, don't worry. Well, the thing is, Apple is being famous for making money with hardware that they design. Overpriced hardware, okay, we all agree on that, but it just works. Most of the times it really works, and the customer satisfaction of Apple users is really extremely high. On the other hand, Facebook and Google, the guys behind the Android consortium, are famous, or I think notorious, for making money not with hardware, not very good at that, but with data. And I think 800 million people already trust their credit cards to Apple to purchase, to make a purchase very easy. So Apple entered the payment market. The user satisfaction in the United States is extremely high, and with NFC payment systems like the Apple Watch, and everybody who thinks Apple Watch will be a disaster, you're wrong. I've been testing it for a few weeks, and yeah, I'm sold. But if Apple is entering the payment market and also makes it easier to computize all the receipts and stuff like that, well, they're not far away, because now they use the existing banking system, but, well, it's a matter of time when they can use something like the blockchain to bypass all the banks. They don't need a bank anymore because it's too expensive. Really too expensive when you compare it with the technological possibilities of this time. And most of the banks already know that. So I advise the board of ING, one of the big banks in the Netherlands, And they're all trying to figure out what to do with Bitcoins and with especially the blockchain. So forget about Bitcoin, it's about the blockchain. And I don't know if in the nearby future banks will be obsolete or not. I think they will. When you have competitors like Apple, good luck with that. But they're already in this. Who of you is working for a bank is already experimenting with the blockchain or considering blockchain experiments? Yeah, very well. Maybe are you in the panel discussion? Yeah, Paul. Maybe we could you could dive into that later on. But as I said, the blockchain is bigger than just financial transactions. Honduras is known for being a country with one of the most corrupt countries in the world, and I think on this continent they have that problem as well in several countries. I heard, I didn't check it myself. But in Honduras, they had real problem with figuring out land transactions. Whose land is this? Is the transaction being done right? And the good part of the blockchain is that you can use it as an open ledger that you cannot tamper with. So you don't need a government anymore if you can use technology like this for transaction. I just wanted to share it with you so you can think about it. So I want to talk a bit about disruption because of the Apple Watch as well, because there is some news around it that I never read in the newspaper, which is weird. And I just wanted to mention it to you because it shows the tremendous disruption power of mechanisms like this. So I think the biggest promise of Apple Watch has nothing to do with money or with vanity or with style. I think there's something bigger behind this. I don't know who of you knows how Steve Jobs died, but he died of pancreas cancer. And he was very upset about it because he really didn't like to die. But he was not just a guy, he was Steve Jobs. So if you're Steve Jobs and you have 80,000 of the smartest people in the world working for you, and you're sitting on a cash pile of more than $100 billion, and you're gonna die, and you're pissed off and very angry at certain types of people who are not keen in sharing information to help the world. I think the medical guys and the pharmaceuticals. What would you do if you were prepared to go thermonuclear on Android because they were stealing your ideas? What would you do if you were dying? So I think what really happened is that Steve Jobs, when he died, went thermonuclear on the entire medical industry. And I think it is really time to solve that problem as well. So what did Apple do? They started ResearchKit. Anyone here heard about ResearchKit before? Maybe a few. ResearchKit is the first global open source research kit where any individual can use the iOS platform to do medical research. One of the main reasons that medicine is very expensive, that all the pharmaceuticals always say research is very expensive, but that's not true anymore because of this. So potentially 800 million people can contribute to medical research. On the day they opened this program in the United States, they had more on one single day participants in research to breast cancer than all the cancer clinics in the entire States in 1 year altogether. So this is the beginning of the end of the pharmaceutical world as we know it. So this is what you can do with powers like this. It's powered by sensor technology because devices like this have a lot of sensors. And they're jumping on a bigger trend called the quantified self movement. I don't know, who of you is using a fitness tracker or has a wearable? Yeah, so I'm one of the founders of this community worldwide. I don't know if they have a location in South Africa as well, but people from the entire world are gathering together, like in the FinTech world, to figure out how to solve stuff on a mankind level when it comes to medical stuff. I'm also the founder of this Quantified Self Institute in the Netherlands, where all kinds of disciplines work together to figure out how can we use science, technology and fun to figure out great stuff that can save us a lot of money. And well, I'm also a biohacker. And biohackers are guys who are figuring out what will happen when we combine biology and technology. And well, actually I did this for real. This is a body artist because a doctor didn't want to do it. And here he is using a pretty thick needle to create a chip in my arm. So I don't know, a few of you already have bitcoins, but I actually have the bitcoins in my arm with this little chipset. I also can start my car with it and open my door. So putting technology in your body to benefit is new. But we're already used to pacemakers, aren't we? Any objections to pacemakers? Like that's a bridge too far, we shouldn't do that? So now we're entering an age where people like you can actually play and toy with this and figure out what to do with all these possibilities. And well, this guy is doing even cooler stuff. He created a liquid, and if you put it in your eyes, you have night vision for 6 or 7 hours. So if you produce night vision binoculars, they're pretty expensive, and you're not allowed to export them to certain countries, well, I think you will be out of business because people are already thinking about stuff like this. Well, I think the best story about disruption in this field comes from this guy, Jack Andreka. And I would like to challenge you with all your knowledge, your research, your talent, your experience. This guy was 13 years old, and then a friend of his family died of pancreas cancer like Steve Jobs did. And Jack was a teenager, didn't have much to do. And from his 13th until his 15th, Jack studied pancreas cancer and the diagnostics. If you get pancreas cancer, you have a problem, like Steve Jobs. The chance that you survive is only 2%. Well, that's a huge... And I think because of that, there's a huge market for pancreas cancer diagnostics and treatment. So let's say you're in a comfortable $40 billion market. And this guy, in only 2 years' time, with no experience, no education, no money, no resources at all, just Wikipedia and the web, figures out a way in only 2 years' time to diagnose pancreas cancer 400 times more accurate, 196 times faster, and 26,000 times cheaper. He did that. He will get a Nobel Prize, don't worry about it. He doesn't worry about money, plenty of money. So he changed the survival rate of pancreas cancer from 2% to 98%. So if this guy, as a teenager, without any resources, with only the web, Google, Wikipedia, can do this. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, what can you do to contribute to society? I think it's cool. So, what to do with all of this information? Well, I don't know if you know Seth Godin, one of my heroes. He said this a few years ago. When everyone has access to the same tools, then having a tool isn't much of an advantage. Everyone in the world that has access to the web has potentially access to anything you might need. You can upskill whatever you need, you can rent stuff, you can lease stuff, you can create a production line, prototypes, stuff like that. And he says, yeah, in the industrial age, the age of scarcity, everything depended on having stuff and tools that others didn't own. But that's not true anymore. He says, time for a new advantage. It might be your network, still important, and the connections that trust you. And it also might be your expertise. Oh, you're very good at something, you really learned something, or maybe you have an MBA. Well, good, very well. But most of all, he says, I'm betting it's your attitude. And that's the good news, because attitude is the thing that you wake up in the morning, you step out of bed, and you can choose your attitude. Are you open to new stuff or not? Are you curious, or you think you know everything? Are you flexible or not? And I think in this network and information age, in this new renaissance, like I like to call it, I think your attitude is more important than your network and your expertise. And I have a nice example of that. The guy on the left is Omar, he's a friend of mine. The guy on the right is Leonard, a friend of his, and I know him as well. And the guy in the middle, maybe you've heard of him, is called Sir Richard Branson. And Sir Richard Branson was in Amsterdam, addressing a speech to 1,000 students a few years ago. And afterwards he had to go to Washington in his private jet because he was attending the inauguration of Barack Obama. And Omar was sitting there in the audience with his friend Leonard, and the students were allowed to send a text message to a big screen, and then Branson would answer them. And Omar did something very smart. He sent a text message to Richard and said, "Mr. Branson, you are going to Washington. Can we fly with you?" And Branson understood the intention and the joke and the fun of that and said, "Not a problem, but you need your passports." Okay, so Omar and Leonard went out of the room on their bike, went to home, got their passport, got back, and then they flew with Richard Branson, private jet, towards Washington. But while they were in the air, they were going down again from Amsterdam to London because his wife wanted to go to Obama as well. Of course, it's what happened. But then the good part is that the team of Richard Branson paid for the staying cost and the trip back. And then Omar made, I think, about $2,000 or $3,000 per hour. I think that's a lot of money, by telling this story to audiences like you. And after 3 years, he had the phone number of the Prime Minister of our country, and all the other presenters, and all the bankers, and he know everyone in any industry. Because if you're 20 years old and you have a story like this, you make a lot of money, and you also have a lot of access. So he didn't have any expertise. He didn't have a network, but he had the right attitude. And he was awake enough to think, okay, let's ask if I can join him. So this is, I think, a good example that attitude is becoming more important than your expertise and your network. I can talk for hours about this, but that's not the plan of today. We will share online afterwards all the links that you just saw. On my website, martijnaslander.nl, you can find an English page. And actually, I have every 3 months I have an English newsletter where I share everything that I will discover in the upcoming few months. I have time for a few questions if you would like to ask something. Is that okay, Graham, because you're the chairman of this session? Okay, anyone want to reflect on this? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so for the people that didn't hear it, there's now a robot that is self-aware. How does it will affect how consumers will behave? You mean all of the consumers or the people who buy that robot? We have no idea. Because we're now in an age where a lot of stuff will happen and we have no idea how people will respond to that. So when it comes to self-aware robots, I mean, that is science fiction for a lot of people. But remember, a lot of stories I just demoed or showed to you, a lot of people think, wow, that's science fiction. But this chip in my arm is not science fiction, it's happening right now. And in the 60s, they promised us flying cars, and we still don't have them. But we have a device that we can use to talk with people on the other side of the planet and have video as well. That's already here. So, but I think science fiction is now and not tomorrow. And what will happen when robots are self-aware on a large scale and can predict stuff, I have no idea how consumers will behave. I don't even know if we still need to call them consumers, because like Alvin Toffler said in the 70s, we will have the age of prosumers. So the consumer will also be a producer. Anyone else? Yeah, Paul. What's my, well, the education system as we have it right now teaches stuff based on things that happened before. And I think we need to study things that are coming up. We teach a lot of kids to memorize all kinds of stuff, but if you have an iPhone, actually voice is 98% accurate. So if I talk to my iPhone and say, okay, look up a picture of whatever, then it will have it in under 2 seconds. So I think the return on investment on any, sorry for the university guy, but the return on investment for any study, except for maybe a few medical ones, is not good enough, because I have no idea how you can make money with doing an academic study or an MBA when you compare with everything that's already happening right under our nose. So we have to transform the education system, but nobody knows how. And that's perfectly logic, because things are going too fast right now. And the amount of change that's happening right now is unprecedented because of this convergence of all these technologies. And this graph, this exponential graph, you have to keep in mind with everything that you read in the newspaper. Because when I talk to pension funds, I say to them, all your assets are in industries that are dying. And then he said, yes, but I have a bigger problem. I cannot transfer my assets in new markets because they're so unpredictable that by law and because of compliance, I have no idea where I can transfer them to safely. So if the top dogs of the big pension funds are already aware of this is happening, well, the guys in education system already know, but nobody knows what to do about it. But I think they're under threat more than ever. And I think if they really want to educate people with something, they have to educate them about attitude and not about content. Because if people have the right attitude, they can learn everything that they want to learn. So, yeah, that's about it. Yeah. Okay, what fuels my interest in taking technology to the new level? Well, I'm not a very technical person. I cannot program. I don't even understand HTML. But what I see is technology is enabling the biggest power shift when it comes to power mechanisms we've ever seen on the mankind level. When you look at the funding of terrorism, most of it is based on scarce assets. When assets are not scarce anymore, well, then there's no funding and there's no reason for a lot of conflicts. If we have fresh water and food for everyone on the planet, I think, and we can enable that through technology, well, I think that's good news on a mankind level. And if I can contribute to that and can interconnect with people like Jack Enraka, and he's not on his own, there are thousands of those guys. If we can gather them together and they can learn from each other, I would love to contribute to that. So this is where my personal interest comes from. Yeah.
So you mentioned the confluence of these technologies that are happening, which is profound. My question is, all this thrives on an ecosystem. So like we obviously know Silicon Valley. So an Uber gets created because there is tons of venture capital money backing it. But could an Uber have got created in Japan or in Africa? Maybe no.
Yeah.
Well,
the problem that I have with most of the Silicon Valley guys is that they are money driven and market driven with venture capital behind it. And with a main reason like making money. But if you're in the business of making money, you will soon be out of business because then you don't contribute to society. So you said, could Uber have been happening here or in Japan? Well, in France, and France is not one of the most innovative countries in the world. I know that because I come there every now and then. They invented BlaBlaCar. BlaBlaCar could potentially be bigger than Uber because it's far more social and beneficial. And BlaBlaCar is hitchhiking and then paying for it with people that have a good reputation because of two-way reputation systems like Uber is using. So I think this is far more sympathetic to use than Uber. And it's French, come on. If they can do it, I mean, you learned how to make wine here. So, yeah. Well, if I understand your question right, the question is, what will the impact of legislation will be on people who are trying to compete and enter the financial market compared with the big systems that we have now? I have no idea, but what I see is that you can be a government, but you cannot do anything about the Bitcoin or the blockchain. So you can try to get rid of that, but good luck with that. We're living on the World Wide Web, and we've seen that governments are not very good at dealing with the World Wide Web. Actually, there's a lot of hidden unemployment within governments because there are a lot of people who are working there are doing stuff that's absolutely obsolete when you compare with the technological possibility of this age. So I advise the Dutch government, and I think we have 400,000 civil servants doing stuff that's really not necessary anymore. And they all cost tax money. So back to you. I wouldn't worry if I was a startup in the fintech world about legislation. I would worry about your capabilities of figuring out a way how to go around it. And I think going around existing legislation and systems is easier than ever. But then you have to work on your trust level. So your credibility, your reliability, your intimacy, and your self-orientation. And if people understand that you're not trying to just make money, but really trying to add value on a mankind level, then I think you're safe. One last question, and then we're gonna.
Which other sectors do you see the blockchain having the biggest impact?
Where will blockchain have the biggest impact? Well, that's for sure governments. Forget about finance system, governments. Because they will change the power mechanism of governments. I mean, let's talk elections. We are not quite sure which countries, the elections and the established powers, which votes are being tampered with. And forget about electronic voting. When you use the blockchain as a voting mechanism, a credible, checkable transaction system, then you cannot use your powers when you don't like the outcome of the voting. So it will transform democracy on a mankind level. And that's far more bigger than everyone ever expected. Okay, I can talk for hours, but that's not the idea of today. I'm going to give you back to Graham, and I will be there afterwards with the drinks. Thank you.